She's an abandoned princess, the most useless princess. And she has nothing, and her only hope is to escape from the imperial palace. And when that day comes, when the one who will save her, whoever he may be, appears, she is going to leave this palace with gratitude in her heart. Joseph Patello. That was before this man came along. 5 years ago, the Imperial Hall of the Princess. People are shouting that all witnesses have pointed to Her Majesty Aristana as the culprit. She must pay for her sins. Well, the girl stood there thinking it was all nonsense. No one could blame her. There was silence in the hall. The cameraman asks his question. He asks one last time, "Princess Aristana, do you confess to killing the prince?" The princess replies that she does not admit it. The girl is sure that the emperor knows that she is innocent. This is to see if the pretender to the throne is competent enough. The princess replied that her answer remained the same. She did not hurt or kill Prince Zegwin. Zegwin was the only one among the many pretenders to the throne. He was close to her. However, at some point, Zegwin became aggressive and she couldn't get along with him. Zegwin shouted, "How long can she pretend? She must not be shameless Aristana because the emperor would not care for her until the end of the age." "What insolence!" the people cried out. They asked that your majesty pass sentence, and the girl be punished as she deserved. The emperor looked at her without uttering a word. We are fascinated that his favorite challenger will not be able to get out of a difficult situation. In the meantime, a torrent of mud continued to pour down on her. The girl began to ask herself, what had she been living for all this time? Her mother died after squandering all her money. Her brother died hating Aristana and blaming her mother's death. The emperor left her without any remorse. She's not just the golden life she's been given, but she has nothing left. She always wanted to be a proud daughter and sister, and tried not to be inferior to her brothers. But it was all for nothing. The sentence will now be passed. Aristana Iogrante is sentenced to 2 years imprisonment, in the dirtiest parts of the palace, and she is only allowed the bare minimum of human necessities. The emperor asked if she had anything last to say. The girl thought in surprise. Last? She said she hoped she would have decent conditions. What, has she lost her mind? Do what you want. But the girl just wanted to rest. The emperor said, "Lock the criminal in an underground prison." As she was leaving, the girl saw his Prince Kilstein Iogrante. He is believed to be the main character in the story. After the sentence is carried out, she will regain her position, and she will be able to leave the palace. So one must be patient, Aristana thought. She would succeed. As he passed Prince Kilstein, he told her that she, poor Aristana, had had her wings clipped after all. When he calms down, he'll regret it. And on today's day, the girl got very angry and snatched a sword from one of the guards, then brought the sword up to Kilstein's neck, the sword she had taken from the guard. At that moment, the emperor swung his hand, and that sword slipped out of Aristana. Guards ran up to the prince and began to ask, "Your Majesty Kilstein, are you all right?" The prince replied that he was fine and added, "Yes, don't you stand in front of him blocking the view." Jumped up to the princess and handcuffed her. Said they were blocking the view of his beautiful sister's unhappy face. The emperor shouted, "Take her away!" As the princess was leaving, she said, "Damn it, it worked out just the way he wanted it to." At last, Prince Kilstein said, "Come back, Aristana, I'll be waiting for you." The guards led the princess to the stables, removing the handcuffs and pushing her forward, they said. "Here? Yes, they hope you can reign right here in the stables, Aristana Iogrante. Highness, former princess." The girl looked around and thought, to rule in a place like this? There were mice running around, cobwebs on the walls, cold and damp. A man came out to the girl and said, "She's here at last. First get some water and clean this place up," he said. The girl didn't know it would be like this. The imperial family changes its attitude very quickly. Today, a few days ago, she was the emperor's favorite. Now it seemed to her that it had all been a lie. She tried her best because she wanted to be recognized, and she wholeheartedly accepted everyone's kindness. But only now she had to scrub the floors in the stable. On the day of the trial, there wasn't a soul on her side. If he saw her now, she thinks he'd like the look of her, Kilstein. The girl asked to be given at least a good bed, but, of course, no one even listened to her. There was some noise near the door. The door opened, and a tray of food was placed on the floor, saying, "It's time to eat." There was a piece of bread and some kind of chowder on the tray. The girl took that hard, stone-like bread and the liquid soup. Yes, she thought, this is a delicacy. She had indeed fallen to rock bottom, Aristana. The next morning the girl went straight to the mop. She was met by the stableman who asked, "Oh, so you've been here all this time?" The man asked today to get rid of the weeds that grew thickly behind the castle, and Aristana calmly agreed to pull them. The stableman is old now, walking with a stick. He noticed that the girl was smiling. He thought, maybe she's crazy. When he looked to the side, he saw that she had also forgotten her scissors. How was she going to get rid of the weeds? Aristana walked towards the castle, and as she walked she pondered the weeds. Yeah, he did say to get rid of them, didn't he? The girl walked to the backyard, picked up a box of matches and lit a match. Then she threw that burning match onto the dry grass, and thought that it was likely for the fire to spread right up to the imperial palace if she could also burn everything. People came running in shouting, "Fire! What madman has set fire to the castle?" When they saw Aristana, they said, "Caesar!" Great, she's the one who set the fire, made up ridiculous excuses like she was trying to get rid of weeds. The head guard came out and asked, "Is that a woman?" The men said, "Yes." Walking up to her, he said, "We did it on purpose." And Aristana answered, not even knowing if he would believe it if she said no. The man said, "According to the chief guard's statement, it looks like an accident. You can be free for now. He will report the matter to the imperial family. We'll see what they have to say." In the evening, Aristana lay down to rest and saw a guard sitting in the window. He was dozing, and she thought it was the emperor's order that she should be watched, to have her watched by the guards for 2 months, but they sent such in fools who, instead of watching, are already asleep. The girl thought she was starting to lose her temper, but maybe she didn't need to hold back anymore. Well, it'll be all right either way. And then Aristana began to dirk the next morning, when everyone woke up, and the horses were all over the palace courtyard. All the servants were running and driving the horses out. And then the guards said Aristana needed to do her job properly. Then there was the joke with the manure. All the dung was smeared all over the walls. Also the servants and guards were running around shouting, "Who did this?" The guards would come to Aristana again and say, "Is that you again?" Ah well, the girl hummed songs and pretended she knew nothing. 6 months later. Yeah, sure, it wasn't just Aristana, but other people, men, were doing all sorts of jobs. And now one of these guys says, "Hey, that gray-haired asshole, back at it again?" And the other guy said, "Oh yeah, come on, just ignore it. Is this the first time or the second time?" Well, it was the snotty little brat who ruined it all again. Aristana wondered, snotty? Accepting the life of an underdog turned out to be quite easy. But still, it's hard to eat the blunt bread of a poor life. Gives you a lot of trouble. Like a very thin blanket and it's cold. Or food she's never seen before in her life. She needs to figure something out. What's 2 years? At this rate, she'll be dead in a few months. Although, but you know, the prince... Come on, Aristana already had some thought in her head. She peeked at the maids working in the imperial palace. She saw 2 girls already gossiping. One said to the other, "Don't tell anyone, just keep it a secret." So wherever she ends up, the gossip never stops. Wait a second, she could take advantage of that. And then Aristana began to tell gossip to the maids, who would then spread it all over the palace. But she says something so horrifying that the maids are horrified. They said, "You shouldn't have said such a thing. If anyone hears you, you could be accused of disrespecting the imperial family." But only Ariston. But that didn't frighten her. She was virtue itself. Even if they were caught, wouldn't it be less unfair? If you even knew the truth, she knows who that prince was lounging with. And the maids started asking around. They were very curious about who they were with. Aha, gotcha, Aristana thought. Now her plan was working. Yeah, and the plan was to get into the kitchen with the maids and have a good meal. And for that, she would tell them all the gossip. "Oh, then she was engaged to the count. But you mean to say that his mistress is his kitchen maid?" A few maids gathered and listened to everything she tells them. But the main thing was that the girl was sitting and sipping tea with delicious food, and thinking that she was going to make a lot of noise today. Well, thanks to them, she won't have to worry about food for a while. One of the maids asked, "What about the 14th princess? She's been of marriageable age for a long time and still no groom in sight." The girls laughed with the words, "They think she's still waiting and waiting. But there are big fish left in there, right?" Aristana said. The maid interjected, "The big fish is who?" And Aristana said, "Marquis Joseph Patello." Joseph Patello, born with a gold spoon in his mouth, he is one of the most honorable and accomplished businessmen in the empire, owner of more than a dozen companies with gold mines. He controls most of the railroads that run through the major cities. Because of this, unmarried ladies treat him like a golden antelope. But because he still hasn't married, there are all sorts of rumors flying around. They say he has some defect or is hiding his hundreds of mistresses. The maid said, "Is that what you mean?" She thought there were some other big fish they didn't know about. For maids, there's nothing more satisfying than gossip about the royal family. "Your Highness, you have met the Marquis in person, haven't you?" "Yes," the girls asked. What a Patello, she thought. If I tell them anything more about him, she was sure she'll get another piece of bread. But when she began to give to the throne, he was no longer in the country. No, she doesn't know anything about him either. She hasn't seen him. Then she knows why the Baron's daughter ran away in the night. The maids asked, "Oh, you mean Lady Royce? Finally something interesting," she wants to say. As a result of selling information about the aristocrats, she was able to stock up on food, and when it gets cold, they'll bring her firewood. Now she won't be in need of anything because of the aristocrats' constant misbehavior. Maybe later she could even change the damn bed. What is she even doing here? She shouldn't have come to a place like this to begin with, Aristana thought. She was born to a small family on the outskirts of the Northern Empire, and became part of the imperial family because of her divine power. Only members of the imperial family who have God's blood in their veins have this ability. Because of this rule, those who were of high descent and yet possessed this power could enter the imperial family by selection. Since she was hesitant at the time, thinking only of her family, the emperor also took her brother and mother, the head of the house, to the imperial palace. Mother and Zegman were so happy about it. She was happy to have them with her too. She thought she could keep their happy family together if she tried. But there was a situation where her mother yelled at the maid, how dare she bicker with her. The maid apologized. "Madam," she was really sorry, but the mother screamed. She didn't know who her daughter was. This is Aristana Iogrante, recognized by the emperor himself. Christ, she first saw her mother dragging the maid by the hair and shouting at her and beating her. Her brother, he was used to it, closed the door. He told her to forgive her, for it had been so long since she, Aristana, had come here, and yet she had seen such a thing. But Aristana asked if Mother was always like this. Aristana said she was going to go take care of Mother. Then her brother hugged her and told her not to overdo it. He was asking her a lot, even for their sake. Aristana asked, why so suddenly he hugged her. The brother replied, "No reason." "Why not?" She replied, "It's kind of creepy." Enough, she went. The boy was left standing alone after the door and thought Mother was too stiff too. At this rate, Aristana might turn her back on them. But his mother's response to him was that he was accusing her of being stuck in the castle because of her daughter. She began to weep and said, "Think, Zegwan, she is your mother." As good-natured a child as Aristana was, she could never betray her own flesh and blood. "They just need to accept her kindness," Mother laughed and said. While Aristana tried to look dignified in the eyes of the emperor, her mother took control and did atrocities for her family. She sacrificed her life. She wanted to be recognized as the outstanding successor. But after a while, even Zegman abandoned her, and she eventually lost the emperor's trust. She was so greedy that she only realized it after she lost everyone holding her hands. And now she was sick of this imperial family, sitting by the fire in the fireplace, Aristana thought. 3 years later, Aristana is in the castle sitting by the window. The maid came into the room and asked, "Look, princess, she needs to clean up. Would you mind stepping out for a bit?" The girl replied, "Okay." The maid is staring. The other asks her what she's looking at. And the maid replied that she had noticed that the princess was always sitting by the window thinking about something. When her second maid replied that she didn't know about the princess because she was new. "This princess is a disgrace to the imperial family." The maid said, "Hey, she'll hear. Why are you yelling so loud?" But the second maid replied, "Who cares? Everyone is already talking about it, even though she's been restored to status, but she doesn't do anything about it. She's just crazy and that's it." Down the hall and thought, actually, she can hear everything. Not to say it wasn't true. She was deposed and spent 2 years in a stable, and then she's wasted a year since she was reinstated. She was so pathetic that one could not look at her without tears. Aristana, as the strong heir to the throne, was forgotten by all. Although only 2 years had passed, the emperor had no intention of returning her power, because once she returned, there was nothing left of her importance to an incompetent member of the imperial family, and the palace was like hell. She no longer sees any point in the bloody battle for the throne. She has no choice but to leave this place. Even defective, she's still a member of the imperial family. She won't let her go until the day she dies. She won't even be able to fly away on her own, as if she's watching herself from the outside looking in on a pigeon sitting in a cage. Aristana took this cage and brought it to the open window, opened the cage door, and then the pigeon was able to fly out. Okay, she thought, this monologue is too pathetic. We need to stop acting like the tragic heroine of a novel and find a solution, Aristana. If she can't get out of here on her own, we need to make sure she gets kicked out. A maid knocked on the door, and to Lista she said, "Come in, maid. It's tea time soon. She'll help you get ready." An afternoon tea party is a party where everyone gathers in the hall, drinks tea with desserts, and socializes. It's time for the Empress. Talk to the 20 successors. It's time to meet the siblings she doesn't usually cross paths with. After Zegman's death, it has become an unpleasant event for her, as she is despised by most of the imperial family. In addition to the disgrace of the royal family that the maids talked about, she was called a loser, the most useless member of the imperial family, and so on. The kind siblings gave her all sorts of disparaging nicknames. How they could hate her with all their heart and soul was beyond the girl's comprehension. One of the sisters called a servant to replace a cookie because it had gotten dirty. Aristana touched the cookie, so she asked her to bring a new cookie and throw it away. Never mind that she's a pathetic insect, Aristana, who ranks 20th out of 20 receivers. She just wants to get out of here as soon as possible. Suddenly there was a tapping on the glass with a teaspoon. It means that everyone's attention has been drawn. It was the Empress who asked for everyone's attention and focus. Helena Iogrante, Empress of the Iogrante Empire. First, she would like to thank you all for being here today, all of you. That concludes today's meeting. She was glad they could all get together here and have a good time. She doesn't think she'll be able to forget the stories she heard today, even in a few days. As suddenly a guy's voice rang out saying, "You must speak properly, Your Majesty. Are your words all gathered?" It seems to him that only 10 people were present. It was Leon Iogrante, third in the line of succession. Either he is mistaken, or you pretend not to see those empty seats. And indeed there were a great many empty seats in the auditorium where no one was sitting. The power according to the order of succession is great. Usually no one can oppose the Empress. But even the Empress can't blame him recklessly. But just because of him, the atmosphere has become like a boring reception. Even the appetite is gone, Aristana thought. Leon said that even though the event doesn't mean anything, he wants to say that he always attends them and never misses them, unlike some people. As she sipped her tea, Aristana thought she was a little annoyed at their lack of mutual contact, what he needed from her. Empress told Leon that the others couldn't make it for good reasons, and she thinks like a brother. He could understand them. The Empress said, "Well, she'll leave you first, I'll see you at dinner." Leaving, Leon said that today's meeting was just crappy as usual, though. Leon went toward the exit, and his brothers hurriedly ran after him with the words, "Brother, let's go together." One of the sisters said, "Gosh, someone might think they're dogs waiting for their master to wake up. Maybe you should go after him too." She was addressing the 2 brothers sitting next to her, as Aristana sat there not touching anyone, sipping her tea. Suddenly she heard a man's voice calling out, "Aristana! How dare she crawl out here defying Brother Leon?" one of her brothers said. The girl was greatly surprised. "Ha!" she thought, "this is really getting beyond all bounds of decency." "Yeah, there's no point in talking to him, I'll just ignore him." And Aristana continued drinking her tea. The guy started yelling, How dare she ignore him?" Out of anger, he grabbed her teacup and threw it on the floor. Aristana thought, okay, he asked for it. She's going to give him a hard time. And turning to him, she said, "Now listen, she came here silently and sat quietly. So what did she do wrong?" "Are you saying Leon acted like that for no reason? You think he was just looking at her like that?" Brothers and sisters, as usual, just watching with a chuckle for another fight, I should say. "You have a very elegant hobby, this guy," pointing a finger at her and saying that if it weren't for her, they wouldn't be hated. One of the sisters began to say, "Brother, please calm down. Sister didn't do it on purpose, did she?" That sister was Nella Iogrande, the 14th princess of Iogrante. A girl Nella said, "Her very existence is like an eyesore." That's probably why Brother Leon had such a disgruntled look on his face. Brother said, "There you go, and that does seem to be true, sister," Nella replied. "So don't worry too much about something so useless." Aristana stood up from the table and thought, "Well, it's the same thing every time. Aren't you tired of all this?" Then the brother said she was embarrassing them even though he was third in line. She shouldn't have come. Turns out she's the local lunatic. But the girl did the sensible thing. She thought, "Let him go on talking, and I'd better go away so I don't have to hear all this." The other sister, Nella, said, "Brother, look! She's leaving just like that!" The young man said, "What's the matter, wench? What's wrong with your unapologetic behavior?" Grabbing her shoulder. That's why the third prince frowned, looking in her direction. She wants him to teach her how to behave. While he was saying all this, Aristana picked up the teapot that had tea poured in it, which was standing on a table on wheels. Turning toward her brother, she splashed that teapot open lid in his face. He yelled at her, "How dare she do such a thing?" Sister Nella immediately rushed over to her brother with the words, "Brother, is he all right?" Aristana said from where the third prince stood. "You all look just like her. No better than an insect or a maggot. Didn't he enjoy that party just after seeing him?" It's funny how insignificant you try to make yourselves seem better by talking bad about each other. Next time, she'll recommend you talk to the third prince before he leaves. Turning around, Aristana said she was done. "Thank you," and walked away. Brother, get up off the floor, said she was a crazy fool. He was drenched in tea. And she can't just walk away. Aristana stopped and turned to him. The girl's hand fumbled with the tray on the table, and she thought, she couldn't just leave. It would be a good time to throw that tray at her brother's head, which she did. The brother was left lying on the floor, Sister Nella beside him oohing and aahing, and Aristana said, "Now she can go." The Empress's castle has a bedroom for the heirs who will be attending the dinner. This was her chance to sleep in a good bed, at least for one day. The girl opened the door to enter the room, and this is a decent place to come here. The room was very posh and big, huge bed, quiet, no one in the room. The girl lay down on the bed from being tired. The tea party had just ended. When she went to dinner tonight, she would have to listen to all this again. If you want her kicked out, it's best to have some kind of scandal in a public place like a dinner party. A formal dinner is a big event where both members of the imperial family and high-ranking aristocrats gather. Aristocrats who anticipate the gathering of the named dinner. What will their reaction be when they discover the body of a member of the imperial family in the corridor? If she's lucky, the soldiers will find her early and rescue her. Perhaps then she would be thrown out of the imperial palace for disgracing herself twice. If she fails, at least she won't have to go through it twice. And she thinks, that's not so bad. This is going to hurt, Aristana thought. But if she could eventually get out of here. Okay, she's thought this whole plan through. Now she needs to hurry up and get it ready. The girl got out of bed as she heard the guy's voice say he would. "To you about beforehand. That's not a very good plan you have," Aristana marveled. "Who's here?" "How did he get here?" the girl asked. The guy replied, "Please don't misunderstand him. He came because he needed to talk to you about something and the door was open. He was very eager to meet you, Your Highness Princess Aristana." The guy stood up, walked over to the girl and said he was glad he was finally able to meet you. Aristana replied, "I think it would be polite to introduce yourself first and say who you are, don't you? Of all the high-ranking aristocrats who can freely enter and leave the Empress Palace, there is no one she doesn't know by sight. There's only one person the maids look forward to, the honorable rich man of the empire, Marquis Joseph Patello. How would he know about her plan if she was meeting him for the first time?" Then she said, "Marquis Joseph Patello?" The guy said he was honored that you recognized him. He walked over to the girl and kissed her hand, bowing, and said, "Your Highness Aristana, he officially welcomes you. And unfortunately," he said, "Your Highness's plan will fail miserably." "What's he talking about? And he showed up so suddenly. What does he know?" Joseph said, "Couldn't they, for starters, sit down? His story might take a long time to tell." When not seated, Joseph began to say that your plan would end up putting you on the throne, but it would not be the life you dreamed of. "To the throne?" interjected Aristana. "What does that mean?" Joseph said, "The moment you tried to hang yourself, The rope broke and you fell. It left a big scar on your chin and on your nose. After the scandal of your shameful suicide, your brothers and sisters despise you even more. Even those who have ever spoken to you in any way will stay away. After that, you started taking very different steps, as if to take out your anger. You did not hesitate to kill your brothers and sisters, imprisoning all the people who laughed at you. Some you sold into slavery, and others you forced to do hard labor, and eventually rose to the highest position in the country, leaving behind countless bloody victims. You ruled as Empress of Aristan, isn't that amazing? Asked Joseph. Everyone was surprised that the disgraced imperial family had ascended to the throne in the blink of an eye. No one had expected it. Aristana sat there thinking, that asshole, is he crazy or what? The guy went on to say that you were further divided into two categories about you: an assassin who massacred dozens of members of the imperial family, and a tyrant who glorified the empire. The girl sat there thinking that this guy was in a bad way. He seemed to be in a complete mess of a head. Then he said, Your Highness, you still managed to raise the national prestige a bit, but as a result, you were executed for tyranny and brutal murders. It was a rather miserable end for you, but with him you— Aristana interrupted him and said, Wait, she can't listen to him anymore. You want her to believe everything you say. You just showed up and started talking about events that didn't happen. If you're so eager to write a novel, why don't you go and start a publishing house? She seemed to be in too much of a hurry. Then Joseph interrupted her and said, Your Highness, you are aware of the ability to transmit memories. The girl said, Are you saying now that you have the power to transmit memories? Said he, Knew you were quite perceptive. Reaching out to her, he said he could share his memories with another person through light contact. The story he told you is not fiction. The guy stood up and walked over to the girl. It's already happened, he said, leaning toward her. He held out his hand again and said, Check for yourself. The guy kept insisting that she see for herself. Aristana said, So she's supposed to just believe and hold hands with the Marquis. Joseph said, Believe it or not, it's your choice. But if you don't want it, you can chase him away. Out, he will leave immediately. Aristana thought that maybe this guy was playing with her, but if all it takes is to take his hand once, there's nothing to lose. In that case, the girl reached out to him. Their two hands merged together, and a bright light was formed. At that very moment, Aristana passed out or drifted off into a light sleep. Joseph said as he thought, Your Highness will definitely want to know the truth. He added that may this dream be the last suffering of Your Highness. Then when Aristana opened her eyes, she found herself in a dungeon, seeing herself before her. The girl sees herself sitting on a scaman in a dungeon in front of her. The girl thought, Here? Is it really here? It came to her mind. As suddenly as the voice of the guard, he said, At the sinner's last invitation he brought the Marquis of Patello. Joseph told the guard that his alone would be enough. So, come out, they need to talk. The guard began to ask the question, Well, how can he go out and leave you alone? Then Joseph replied, Do as he says. The guard said, All right then, call me when you're done. The only people left in the dungeon are Aristana and Joseph. Aristana, who has been transported into this dream, thinks about the fact that she cannot believe that the last person she would have called would have been the Marquis Joseph. But there are still extra ears here. What did she want to talk to him about, she thinks? 1,000 people died. Joseph said on His Highness's orders the rebels should be executed. Please say something. Joseph got down on his knee and once again told her what he wanted to say. Didn't he tell you to give up and run away? All the girl replied was, I'm sorry. She was very depressed. Joseph said again, He warned you. Beware of him. Because you ignored his advice, you ended up in this situation. Aristana replied that I am truly sorry. Joseph said he's not here to hear you apologize. He can't say what he wanted to say because they are overheard by the guards standing nearby. If he were alone with you right now, he would say that he would protect you even if he died. He hopes the day will come when he can make that vow to her. Aristana finally woke up in the present tense. Sitting beside her bed was Joseph reading a book. The girl jumped up with the words, Ah! Joseph asked, Are you awake? And she grabbed her head and said, Damn it, she's done. The guy replied, Your Highness, you've turned the imperial palace into a bloodbath and killed 1,000 innocent people of the empire. Right, and that's what ultimately led her to that outcome. Waking from her dream and facing him, she remembered the words he had spoken. Joseph took the girl's hand and said he was looking forward to meeting you. Even if it leads to death, please let him protect you, Your Highness. Then Joseph said he had a suggestion. Would you mind hearing it? A proposal? Interjected Aristana. Why are you doing all this for her? The guy replied, because he wants to help Your Highness, and smiled sincerely. Why he wants to help her so badly, even if his memories are true, she still doesn't understand. The same question plagued her in the dream. Are they close enough? Asked Aristana to have that kind of conversation. Then the guy said, Your Highness, you once dreamed of becoming an outstanding ruler, didn't you? The girl replied, Yes, I once did, but that's all in the past now. Not quite, he said. If Your Highness wishes, you can even push the imperial family into the abyss. What? Interjected Aristana. It doesn't matter if you become a tyrant or a prominent ruler. He will fulfill your every wish, just so long as you live and enjoy life. Joseph asked me to make him your pawn, a disgrace to the imperial family, the most useless loser, Aristana remembered everyone saying about her. For her sake, a man like Joseph Patello wants to be her pawn. She said, Look, Marcus, if you want to cheat, you better find someone dumber. Joseph said that when he woke up, he realized that everything had gone back in time. Taking her hand, he said, Your Highness, perhaps you will not understand him, but above all, what matters to him is that you are alive and breathing and standing in front of him right now. Kissing her hand, he said, That alone is enough to make him start dying. Marquis Patello, what the hell is he doing? Why does he keep looking at her like that? Thought Aristana. She feels like she's slowly losing herself in this man. She's getting sick. She motioned for him to move a little away from her, pushing him aside. As she left the room, she said she didn't want to see him ever again. The girl thought that so much time had been lost because of this madman. It was already dinner time. She hurried to the hall where the reception was going on. It's already started. But if he doesn't, it's going to get worse. She doesn't know if the future Marquis Patello showed her is real. But right now, it was more important for her to deal with this situation. The girl entered the hall where the dinner was being held. When she came in, people started whispering again. Was she the one who married the Count this time? Wait, was she imagining it? Or were they talking about her? The girls continued their conversation. By the way, isn't he turning over 40 this year? Her Highness the Princess is only 16. What can I do? This marriage is approved by the Emperor himself. The men and women at this dinner were talking to each other. The heir to the throne, sold like a thing. Those who gave up the fight for imperial power often sold themselves to find their own way to survive. This was possible because the emperor was indifferent to his children. This child's expression certainly left much to be desired. Passing by the girl, this arresting girl, she thought, by the way, instead of staying in the castle where I stayed, nothing but pride. It would be better if she was sold outside the castle for the price of a woman from the empire. Like who? Just as suddenly, she heard a male voice say that he was wondering who it was sneaking up like a rat. And it turns out to be the disgrace of the imperial family. It's the brother she poured the teapot over her head with the tea talking. She didn't show her face, and he was beginning to think she'd finally realized where she belonged. She must be nerding out in the luxurious room. He felt sorry for her. Aristana walked past the waiter who was delivering champagne, taking a glass. She put it up to this guy's nose to scare him. That if he talked too much, she'd throw something back at him. Oh, what is it? She said for her brother's sake. She walked around the so-huge banquet hall and scoped him out to treat him to a glass of champagne. The girl took a sip and said, Been waiting so long, she was like a trained dog. As soon as you saw her, you immediately came galloping over. Her brother whispered to her that she shouldn't do that next time. Okay. Walking up to her, he said, That's how she only has the courage to speak in a safe place. You came up, Sister Nella. Between them. She put up her hand with a fan to stop the rasping. Then she said, Sister, how can she talk to her brother like that in a strict hierarchy? Nella said, Even if you don't stand a chance, please stop defaming the good name of the imperial family. Aristana replied that he started talking a lot after he became his brother's henchman. Nella said, Why doesn't she just laugh quietly as usual? Aristana replied, making sure Nella didn't come any closer or she'd get bad breath. What the hell is she talking about? Her brother said, getting even more angry at her. Nella couldn't stand it and shouted, What rude behavior! She advised her to be careful what she said, and she was talking nonsense again. The brother said, "Don't listen to her, Nella. That's the end of her boasting, Aristana. If you apologize politely, he'll turn a blind eye," the guy said. But Aristana said, "Is it her fault that her sister has bad breath?" The brother tried to say, "Yes, she's to the end," but Sister Nella shouted, "That's enough! Stop bickering and be quiet!" Brother said Aristana he can't let her arrogance go any farther. For him, as the head of the third mansion, this is unfortunate, so he will sentence her to forfeiture of half of the budget presented to her. If she shows signs of remorse, he may change his mind. The third mansion of the heirs is hell, where the heirs from the 14th place in line to the last candidate live. The 5th prince is the 14th ranked heir to the throne, so this Pri is the highest ranked aristocrat in the mansion, and is an influential figure there. She wondered why he kept picking a fight that was never going to end. He must have intended to do it from the beginning. He said he hoped she wouldn't complain about his decision, as if that would scare her. Aristana said he's going to cut an already small budget in half. That's funny. He asked what was she going to do now? Aristana said it was better to show what she was about to do. She had a glass of champagne in her hand, unfinished. She splashed him in the face and said, "She's going to do it." Sister Nella ran up to the brother and started asking how he was doing. Aristana set her glass down with champagne and said, "Why? Did he really think she couldn't do it a second time? What's more, she feels so sorry for her brother. He doesn't learn from mistakes at all." Honestly, she thought he'd avoid it this time. A voice rang out. "This is great!" Aristana heard and thought that this voice was very familiar. "But just for that," said the fellow, "you decided to keep him." That guy turned out to be Joseph. Aristana replied to him that she would tell him she didn't want to see him anymore. Joseph replied that he had yet to hear the reason why you refused his offer to be your knight. The Marquis of Sweat just called himself a knight. He must be trying to take advantage of her. He's a tricky one after all. The siblings began to discuss around him. The brother asked Nella what was going on here. The girl replied that she didn't know. Judging by the situation, Marquis volunteered to be a knight, and she thinks she turned him down. Aristana thought, why does she have to listen to all this? She had told him to get off her back, hadn't she? The girl replied that there was no reason. So stopped bothering her and headed for the exit to leave the banquet hall. Aristana's brother walked up to Joseph and said he wanted to apologize for her. "Marquis Sweat! That's so disrespectful to you, Marquis," the brother said. "The imperial family is also very concerned about her behavior. She doesn't fully realize her place. He is trying to teach her." Joseph said, "Doesn't know his place? I wonder if you are trying to teach others what you yourself do not realize. Get out of my way, Cel Iagrante." Aristana stepped out onto the balcony to get some air. All these events were already messing with her head, but she couldn't get any privacy. Joseph came to her. The girl said that if he had a conscience, why didn't he stop torturing her? Asked what it means to torment. He's only an admirer of Her Highness Aristana. Then why doesn't he stop shamelessly bothering the man and give up? She's not going to fight for the throne and become empress. Joseph said you didn't believe what he showed you. He knew that the 5th prince would decide to cut your budget. That's the point, Aristana said. The girl headed for the exit again with the words, "On top of that, she will now be haunted by rumors that the impertinent princess dared to refuse the Marquise's offer. She's sure the rumors have already spread, and if they haven't yet, it's even stranger than it was." Joseph grabbed her hand with the words, "Your Highness, he says he knew it because he saw the future. How many times does he have to play the role of fortune teller before you believe him? Or is he not good enough to be your knight, Your Highness?" "If it bothers you what these insects say," the girl interrupted him and said, "so the future is true. Then let her ask one question. In the future that Marquis showed her, they were so close." Marquis let go of her hand and said, "But if that were true, perhaps he would show you a very different future." The girl thought, could he have made such an expression on his face? That expression doesn't seem false, but it's still hard to believe it right away. If it's the ability to transmit memories, then what he showed her is the real future. Means that Joseph actually saw his ability to see the future. How can that be? There was talk coming from the hall. "Greetings, Empress. It's good to see you, Your Majesty." Ariston walked into the hall and saw the Empress. She had not expected to appear like this at the end of the dinner. Is that why no one left? Everyone was waiting for her, and everyone knew she was coming. The Empress noticed Joseph and the arresting officer and said, "Oh my, those two, come out already, Asteris." They approached the Empress to greet Her Highness. In addition to her adoration for her biological child, Kilstein, the Empress was known for her favoritism towards all the heirs. That's why she's talking to the arresting woman, too. The Empress asked, "She didn't interfere with them, did she?" Aristana said it was nothing like that, they were already done. "Ha ha," said the Empress. She doesn't think she agrees with her. The Empress turned to the Marquis. "What brings you to our dinner?" she asked. Joseph replied, "He's here to declare that he wants to be a knight." True, he was rejected immediately, he said. The nearby arrestant pretended it was none of her business, looking away. Rejected then? He's the head of the Patello family, isn't he? It seems like a very brave child, though she doesn't know who it is. "You think so?" said Joseph. Aristanov wondered what else he was up to there. The Empress said, "Well, it's not nice for a third party to meddle in the affairs of a man and a woman." With a wave of her hand, the Empress said lastly that she hoped he would still obtain consent. Joseph turned to Aristana and said, "The Empress herself said so." But Aristana didn't care. The girl left and Joseph followed her with the words, "Please choose him. He wants you to sit on the throne and enjoy life." Turned around and said she didn't know how many times she had repeated it. The next day at tea, she was talking to her sister, the 6th Princess Madonia. The girl was surprised. Although it was the Marquis Joseph himself, she said, "No?" asked Madonna to her sister Aristan. She asked why. If it were her, she'd say yes. Aristana said, "Stop talking and get to the point already." Madonia answered her, "How cold she is." The girl said, "It's obvious, though, why she's here, right?" Now Madonna is here to deliver a letter to Aristana. She is one of the few people who speaks to her in this palace. She's Kilstein's half-sister. He brought her to this floor and sent her letters all the time, ordering his sister to do what he wants. Aristana, without opening the letter, tore it into small pieces. Of course, she had never read his letter. Madonna asked her if she had really never read one, and Aristana replied, "Don't worry, a torn letter won't hurt her brother." Madonna said, "You can't be so sarcastic, I mean, she knows she does this for a living." That's right, they're supporting Kilstein together. And even if it wasn't going to be him, everyone was betting on heirs who looked like the Emperor. But the confidence with which Marquis Joseph came to her, the girl thought for a second, as suddenly her thoughts interrupted Madonna, saying that then she will go her way, "We'll see you again." When Madonna gives her a letter, she always leaves a cookie like this. It is a kind of symbol of compassion for her. She gives it to her to calm her down. Taking one cookie, Aristana wondered, what did she do with Kilstein and Madonna in the future? She doesn't know about the last one, but she could have killed the first one, right? She probably did. Aristana thought there was no other option. Aristana went for a walk in the garden, to sit on a bench, get some fresh air and think for a while. She remembered Madonia's words, how the girl had said that she had answered no, though it was Marquis Joseph himself. Did she really look so grumpy in Madonia's eyes? Of course, the only one who will suffer a loss from their agreement is Marquis, but that's what makes it even stranger. She knows better than anyone what sincere loyalty is not, so she can't just take it and trust him. But in that moment, if that were the case, perhaps he would show her a very different future. It wasn't like he was lying or talking nonsense. If what he says is true, how she became Empress doesn't think he was her knight then. "Your Highness Aristana!" And there's that familiar voice again, the girl thought. It was Joseph. "Oh, you wondered," he said. "What have you been thinking so deeply about?" The girl replied, "Thanks to someone who has a lot to think about." Joseph said he was honored. "What do you think so much of him?" Aristana asked what brought him here this time. Joseph replied, "I hear you're having another get-together with the other heirs tonight." The girl asked, "Then what do you have to do with this party?" Holding out his hand to her, he said, "He's here to escort you there. There's a carriage waiting outside, so let's ride together." Aristana said, "That's not necessary. She can get there on her own." Joseph answered her, "Are you sure? His carriage is much more comfortable and faster than yours. He's also prepared your favorite snacks." Joseph said, "That, eh? He thought you could get there comfortably if you used his carriage." "Does he have to eat cookies alone now?" Aristana asked. "Where did you say your carriage is?" Joseph immediately smiled and replied, "He'll see her out now." The girl said, "Don't get her wrong. She's only going with you because she may be late." "Of course," Joseph replied. "He is honored to accompany you." After getting into the carriage, they drove towards the meeting. Joseph offered Aristana a cookie, and she didn't refuse. She took it. She knew that she had learned in the last 2 years that pride does not satisfy hunger. Joseph replied to her that he was glad they came to your liking for cookies. It's a pity his offer didn't taste as good to you as the cookies. You know that, don't you? If he had become a knight of your highness, it wouldn't have been difficult for him to take the throne. Ha, Aristana said. What confidence. What does he think my answer will be? The guy replied, You'll say no. And the girl said, Right. He said, If you don't trust him. But she interrupted and replied, It's not about trust. She had once tried to snatch a lot of things for herself, and she had plenty of reason to envy others. But she lost everything in an instant. The brothers and sisters she trusted turned away from her in an instant. And the emperor doesn't care about children who can't be used. Not that she wanted to tell him about something so insignificant. She just wants to get out of here. Joseph said, Don't you realize that's a stupid dream? Can a person who once belonged to the imperial family live a normal life? If you know the true character of the other heirs, you should realize that shortly after you leave, you will likely be arrested again for treason. Aristana sat there thinking that he kept talking about some annoying things, and in fact they should be arrived by now. Joseph held up his hand for the arresting woman to climb down from the carriage. The guy said that running away normally won't solve the problem. Please take this as a warning. Aristana walked into the cafeteria where they were supposed to meet her family for tea. The atmosphere here is kind of chaotic, the girl thought. She noticed that there were traces of the cake served as dessert on the dishes. Her brother Sel's loud voice rang out, Oh my goodness, Tina, she's such a sleepyhead. No matter how long they waited for it, it never came. So they had already eaten. It's so obvious that it's not even necessary to say, they are purposely told the wrong time. All the country laughed, and covering her mouth with a fan, the sister said, that with her that yesterday, that today tardiness was becoming a habit with her. Aristana approached the girl and asked, Is this place free? The girl replied, Yes, have a seat. Some other of the sisters said, How vulgar. How can you go out with someone who is not your fiancé or knight? No manners at all. How could she continue to dishonor the imperial family? Tina was brought tea. That smell, that herbal tea, she remembered as a child. Aristana, as she took a sip of her tea, then looked at the cup. She saw something very important to her. The girl said, just now she definitely felt the power. At a neighboring table sat another sister, who was being comforted by Brother Sel, saying, Don't worry about such a rude girl. And this herbal tea that helps to calm her down, and giving her sister a cup to drink. Sister says that this Aristana can be very irritating to her. At that moment, as soon as Aristana heard she decided to test whether her strength had returned to her, she snapped her finger. This sister's cup shattered into small pieces, along with the tea that spilled on her. The sister shouted, Oh, her new dress! The seated brother next to her said, You're all right. And just when the arresting woman thought she wasn't wrong, some of her strength returned. And then Brother Sel thought, Why did the cup suddenly break in his hands? And he realized that the Aristana, going up to her, he shouted to her that her strength had returned. How dare she do such a thing? I mean, he told her to think about her behavior, but she abused the ability and hurt her sister. Aristana told her brother that he talks too much. The one shouted again, What's the problem? Can't buy her a dress with the confiscated property. Stupidity always catches the eye, no matter how powerful it is. He's the only one in the third mansion with any real power. Why is he blaming her? They say she's the cause of all the turmoil. Sel shouted that he knew her powers were returning little by little. Here, Joseph walked into the cafeteria and said, Your Highness, every time he meets you, the fifth prince is always angry. He thought the herbal tea in your cafeteria didn't help much. Marquise is a family affair, so stay out of it, please, Sel said. That's how it is, said the Marquis. A family affair. Then he can say the same thing. I'm sorry, but this is his cafeteria, so if you'd like to hang out here longer, please pay an extra fee. How dare you, said Sel. Oh, don't misunderstand him. He's telling you this because your lease has expired. Oh, yes, and that you seem to have hurt yourself. And by looking at one of the girls. pulling a vial out of his jacket. He said he was also responsible for the damage caused by the dishes in his cafeteria. Dropping a drop, the guy assured her not to worry. If she used the blue dragon's tears, there wouldn't even be a trace left. Said, "That's it. Is there anything else he can do for you?" Looked at Prince Cell. Cell shouted, "They're leaving." Nella the girl stood up and said, "Yes, of course." Joseph turned to Aristana, who said, "Your Highness, you are probably going back as well. Let him guide you." And the girl agreed. Putting Aristana in the carriage, the guy said, "Please call him when you need him. You've done a good job today, haven't you?" As Joseph closed the door and got into the carriage, the arresting woman said she hadn't changed her mind. All the way they rode in silence, and it was only when the arrestress stepped out of the carriage, arriving at her home, that she said, "Why doesn't he find a more suitable person? You know, even if she agrees, she's only a laughingstock, and if he's with her, he'll become one." Joseph replied, "Don't worry, whatever the case, he never regrets his choice." "Well, have a good trip," the arresting woman said. As she approached the house, she thought, why won't he give up, even though she warns him nicely? What else would she have to do to get him to back off? The girl headed to her room to get some rest. Just as she walked in, there was a knock on her door with the words, "Look, Sister Aristan, are you in there?" Opening the door, she saw Elijah. "Hello, sister," the girl said. "I apologize for coming so unexpectedly. The 16th Princess Ilia Iogrante." "Well, she'd like to ask you something," Elijah said. "Really?" thought Aristana. Ilia asked, "Marquis Patello, have you taken him to be your knight?" Aristana said, "What? No, why the hell not?" That's what she decided. Though yes, given all that, you'd think so. Aristana said there was a miscommunication with a similar one. "Really?" she shouted. "Or I mean, Marquis and his sister have nothing to do with each other." Aristana said, "Well, you could say that. Not that there's anything between the Marquis." Elijah clutched her head. "No wonder, he's too good for Sis, but she thinks she was able to gain courage thanks to you," Aristana thought. Although, it's true, but feels strange after saying that. Aristana wanted to ask her, but the girl said, "Okay, she's off. Enjoy your vacation, sister," and ran off. Aresta was left standing by the door thinking. She really only came to ask about this. She doesn't know if she's supposed to like it or not. Whatever. Right now, she's just going to rest and not think about anything. Tomorrow, therefore, she has to go see Zegwan. The next morning, Aristana took a bouquet of flowers, dressed in black, and went to the cemetery to check on her brother. Walking over to the tombstone with Zegwan, Aristana said, "It's here." The girl noticed that there were no footprints. Everything seemed to have been washed away by the rain and wind. She couldn't believe it had never been organized. And it's not to say she feels sorry for him, just that the name wants to honor his memory and look after his tombstone. Unlike Mom's grave, she never goes there of her own free will. Right, just that she wasn't going to be sentimental anymore. The girl was about to leave when a voice called out to her again, "Aristana!" When she turned around, she saw him. The guy said, "Hello, Aristana." It was the biological son of Empress Kilstein Iogrante. The guy was standing with a bouquet of flowers. Aristana said, "But he's got a shameless face, Kilstein." The guy said, "Yeah, he's happy to see her too." "How dare he come here? Why someone like him?" said Aristana. The boy said, "Calm down. He is here to honor her brother." Aristana wondered. Honored. He had come to remember the man he had killed with his own hands. Kilstein said, "It's just she doesn't usually come here." The girl asked, "What's the point of showing up here when she came? He's crazy." It wasn't enough for him to make fun of her. He decided to make fun of a dead person too. The girl turns around and walks away. The guy yells, "Aristana, wait!" Why hadn't she even looked at the letters he'd sent? She turned around and said, why the hell should she even read them? Letters from the man who killed her brother, who took everything from her. Isn't it enough for him to be hypocritical in front of the dead? Guy bowed his head and said, "She should let him make it clear. He didn't kill Zegwan." The girl asked in surprise, "What?" Kilstein pulled a letter out of his jacket and said that he had tried to give it to her through the Madania, but it had not worked, for she had blown them off every time. "This letter is from Zegwan. Guy asked me to take it and read it." Aristana snatched the letter, crumpling it in her hands. "What the hell?" he shouted. "Why is she doing this? This is his last letter. Read it by all means." The girl opened the letter and began to read. It read, "To his sisters Tine, He was always grateful to her that they were able to live in the imperial palace. She has always lived in competition with prominent heirs. He knows that no one can surpass her talent and effort. He has never even visited her or bothered her in his time. The brothers who saw him were always poking and screaming at him. Who he was. How dare he come here, this place where only successors can come. But he thinks he was just an easy mark in the castle. It was hard to even get close to her because he wasn't a successor. That's when he met Kilstein. He was a good friend who protected him, unlike everyone else. He dispersed all the brothers who picked on him and called him names. He thinks he was only able to survive in this imperial house because of her. He was a good friend of mine who didn't think his problems were just nothing. They had many discussions with him about how to help her hold her ground. Realized he couldn't help her. He was just a kind of ballast for her, dragging her down. Kilstein was against it, but he chose to stay away from you so he wouldn't end up being your weakness to her. He's sorry. It wouldn't be the best way to be harsh, daze and make her distance herself from him. But no matter what he said, his choice hurt her and made her feel even more alone. Tina never forgave him. Thank her so much for trying so hard for him and his mom. He wanted to take care of her from the shadows, for her own good. Aristana, angry, tore up this letter, saying that his handwriting was familiar, and indeed, there was a letter from him. What's the point of doing this to her? What does he want her to do? She doesn't understand. Who killed Zegwan? Asked Aristana. Kilstein said that unfortunately her anger was useless right now. What can she do now but scream and ask without outcome who did it? If she wants to catch the culprit who killed Zegwan, then she should first try to develop her powers to fight back and find the real culprit. That's the next step. Then she decided to ask something else. If he was really on Zegwan's side, then why the hell did he say that? His words were as follows. As a result, she had her wings ripped out. Said he wanted to motivate her. So whether it was revenge or hope, she needed motivation so she could move on. But he didn't think this method would work. He told Zegwan, but either way, he'll be waiting. Mind you, he'll be on her side to find the real culprit. Aristana made her way back home. Walking down the corridors of the castle, she wondered what the hell she was supposed to do. It was incomprehensible to her. Are you saying he's been purposely being so mean to her and talking to her all these years? What were you angry about? That she hated him? Because the real culprit who killed her brother is walking around now. Those who benefited from Zegwan's assassination had stripped her of her will and her place as successor. It was definitely one of the successors. But who the hell was it? Too many suspects. What do we do? At some point, Ariston was grabbed by the arm. She turned around and saw Joseph. He said, Your Highness, I apologize. You did not hear him, though he called for you several times, over and over. Where are you? Where are you flying again, Princess? Ariston, said the Marquis. He replied that it would be an honor to honor him, but even if he is the cause of your suffering, he belongs entirely to you, and please don't hurt yourself. The girl asked him. She wasn't sick of coming to a princess who wanted nothing to do with him yet. Joseph said he thought you wouldn't like his answer. After all, if your highness accepted it, he would be more than happy. Joseph repeated, only one, and no one else your mistress. Ariston thought for a moment. Joseph Patello. Could she trust him? A suspicious, brash, stubborn man. She still doesn't know him very well. Still, he only has eyes for her, and his words, he'll make her empress is an empire. Joseph said if she received him today, he could confidently say he could be of use to her, your highness. He can do anything you wish, just tell him. Aristona wondered. If this was really her last chance, which it wasn't and probably never would be. The girl replied, okay, she agrees. It sounded gentle at first, but then she grabbed him by the scruff of the neck and said, this may be his chance, given by God himself, Marquis and Joseph Patello. Or it may turn out to be the hand of the devil, but she'll take it. She'll give him a chance to be her knight and complete in his place. He better be ready. From disgraced imperial family to empress, he's going to have a tough time, Ariston said. It's too late to back up now. Marquis, she's already chosen him. The guy got very excited. Ha 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 ha, he started to say. You are right. Your highnesses are one knee older. He said he would give her everything he had. Kissing her hand, he added that she would crush them all and rise to the top. He is honored to serve her, his mistress. But Ariston said, Listen carefully, Marquis. From now on you had better not be so insolent. If he wants her to continue to stay with him, the guy replied that he would keep that in mind. And Listona said, now the only thing left for him to do is to take the oaths of a knight. Pandora's altar, everything happens so fast. It's like he's prepared for everything in advance. Arrested in thought. Even dragged her to the Empress to make her a witness to their non-deal. It was like this. Joseph said, now let's go to the Empress. Ariston asked, why go to her what? Joseph replied, she will notarize their vows. Ariston said, absolutely not. Joseph said that Ariston was stubborn enough. She noticed that it even took him a second to get the carriages ready to drive down the aisle. He was always on standby all those days when he came to see her. Let's get started, Joseph said. Ariston hesitated, wondering if everything was going to be all right. There was a guy standing there. It was the high priest. He said, before the oath, you two. Open with the high priest without lying. Aristana Iogrante, second princess of the empire. Joseph Fatella, Marquis of the empire and businessman. The oath of a knight. Before Pandora, the god and progenitor of the empire, you must swear to dedicate your body and mind to the empire, to challenge whoever encroaches upon it by joining forces with each other. It's like taking responsibility. If either party breaks the oath by force, the sworn traitor will be burned to death, and so lord and knight. You may exchange the sign of your vows. Ariston thought she'd forgotten.